Okay, today is October 18th. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time, so we're going to get started with our weekly Latin studies meeting. Since new students are joining us, let me just say that these meetings are intended for students in any, I'm not changing any names anymore, time's up. These meetings are intended for students at any level in any of our Latin courses in the academy. The meetings are intended to help with Latin studies in general. They're not intended to replace online studies or the activities of the online courses. They really don't count for anything. They're just meant to help you enjoy better success and make better progress in your Latin studies. So the tasks that are in the online courses, the studies, the assessments, the quizzes, that's really what matters. These meetings are just meant to help. They're all recorded, so you can watch them again if you'd like to. Also, if you miss a week, you can catch a recording of the meeting. The meetings are published automatically on our Vimeo channel. I'll type the address real quick. I recommend you watch the videos on Vimeo, vimeo.com/classical liberal arts, because there's no ads on Vimeo. So those videos are better to watch. What I actually do, I post things on YouTube for public access, and they have ads and stuff in them. And then money that's produced by the ads on YouTube, I take that money and use it to pay for our subscription to Vimeo. So it actually pays for our private videos. That's what I use YouTube for. But I'd recommend you watch the videos on Vimeo so you don't have to bother with all of the ads and junk. Okay? So that's where you should go for videos. And like I said, when we have these meetings, it takes about an hour for the meeting recording to be published on Vimeo. So within a couple hours, you should be able to access it, and then it's there permanently for you to check out whenever you want. Okay, so vimeo.com/classical liberal arts. I don't intend for students to watch videos on YouTube. Okay. Having said that, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at lesson 3. We're going to look at lesson 3 in Latin reading. And some of you may say, well, I'm not on lesson 3 yet. That's okay, because you're going to be on lesson 3. So it's helpful for us to go through it together. Some of you may say, well, I'm already past lesson 3. That's okay, because you probably don't know it as well as I do. And I can share some information that will be new to you and helpful that's not in the written lesson. And it's good to review. So it's good for everybody. And if you pay attention, it'll help you to make better progress. And as I always say, I'm going to talk about things in these meetings that I'm not going to put in a written lesson, because I want written lessons to be simple. I don't want 1,000 different pieces of information to look like a modern textbook. It looks like, information just explodes all over the pages and is a big confusing mess. I try to keep lessons simple, and we can talk about more complicated things in meetings. Okay, so lesson 3 we're going to look at, and then if time allows, we're going to look at the next lesson in Latin vocabulary. We looked at the lesson on God last week, and this week we're going to look at the lesson on the world. So no matter what lesson you're on, no matter what level you're at, how old or young you are, if you pay attention, this should be helpful. All right, so let me share my screen and we'll get rolling here. I think I'm ready to do this. Okay, so you should see the Latin text on the screen. You see the Latin text of the Gospel of John? Give me a quick wave if you see the Latin text on your screen. Nice and big, you should be able to read it. I'll move the text around as we go through it. Don't bother with hand raising. We're not going to be asking any questions. When I say give me a wave, I just mean wave at the camera if you got your camera on. All right, so we have verses 11 through 15 of chapter 1. And again, I don't care what lesson you're on. I don't care if you're on lesson 1 or 2 or 32. It doesn't matter. We're going to go through this reading together. I'll explain the Latin. You can ask questions about things that come up if you want to. Realize, though, that I'm not always looking at the chat, so I'll check it once in a while to see if there's been any questions. But I'm not staring at the chat the whole time. But we're going to go through this together, and I'll explain all the details of the Latin, make some comments that aren't in the lesson, and also explain how it relates to Latin grammar, talk about English vocabulary, things like that. So As I said, if you've got a piece of paper or a notebook with you, it's a good idea to have one and just jot things down as we go, things you think are interesting. And remember that this video will be available in recorded form, so you can always watch it again if you need to. All right, so verse 11. This is the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, verse 11. We read, in propria venit, et sui eum non receperunt. In propria venit, et sui eum non receperunt. So to begin with, as I pointed out last week, we have prepositional phrases. A prepositional phrase is a preposition followed by a noun of some kind, and they're always to be considered as groups together. They're called prepositional phrases. The prepositions in Latin, let me just say, if I'm glitching, it's because of your internet connection. I actually have a very good internet connection. So in Latin, the prepositions, they are followed by a noun, and they require the noun to be in a certain case. And the form of the noun that follows the preposition often determines how the preposition is to be translated. All right, so for example, this preposition in the first 10 verses, we've probably already seen it 5 times, and you've already seen it translated in a number of different ways. In the very first verse, we saw in principio, and it was translated simply as in. We saw another example where it was translated for. We saw another example where it was translated to. So you can see that the translations change, and that's usually caused by the noun that it's with and the case that the noun is in. So we have in propria venit, which means to his own things. In propria means to his own things. I'm actually going to turn my camera off here for a minute so I'm not distracted by it. In propria means to his own things, to his own things. And what that means, propria, things that belong to him. Like your own proper things are things that are unique to you, things that are yours. The word came to his own things. And you can imagine that he should have been received by his own things and honored by his own things as the creator of them. To his own things he came, venit. Venit, he came. And this stem here, V-E-N, the general meaning of that stem is to come, and we see that all through English vocabulary. A convent, to invent, advent. You see all of these English words that have this stem ven in them all have at their core the idea of coming. So Advent is the coming to us of Christ. A convent is a place where people come together. Same with a convention. It's a gathering together. So that stem ven means to come, and you see it all through English vocabulary. Okay? So in propria venit, to his own he came. Next we have et. What part of speech is et? This is the kind of thing you need to learn. Identify the part of speech. What part of speech is et? It's a conjunction. Very good. Okay, it's a conjunction, and it's normally translated and. Normally translated and, but it can also be translated even or also, and sometimes it's even translated as but. So it has a number of possible translations. How do we figure out, when a word has a number of possible translations, how do we figure out how to translate it? How do we know? If a word has a number of possible translations, how do we figure out how to translate it? Look at the lesson. That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, let's say you don't have a lesson. Connor has the right answer. By the context of the sentence. Okay, so the idea that you can just grab a foreign language and start reading word by word is not true. You've got to look at the whole sentence, start translating word by word to get a general idea of what it says. And then as you begin to get the general idea, allow that general idea to then help you to polish up and perfect the translation. Okay. So we have et. To his own he came, and sui. Sui is a pronoun. It means his own. To his own he came, and his own. Notice we've got two different words translated his own here. We have propria, and then we've got sui. Sui is a pronoun, though, and it stands in place of the verbum. It stands in place of Christ. And his own, eum, what part of speech is eum? Yes, it means him, but what part of speech is it? The pronoun, very good. And his own, him, non receperunt. Non receperunt. What part of speech is non? What part of speech is non? It means not. What part of speech is non? Yeah, I know it means not. That's not what I asked. What part of speech? So we have a couple guesses. Some say adverb, some say adjective. Let me ask you this. How can we tell a part of speech? How can we tell if a word is an adjective? Does anybody know a test we can use? How can we tell if a word is an adjective? It modifies the noun. Sure, that's assuming we have a noun to look at. But let's say we don't. I'm saying, how do we know that a word itself is an adjective? There's a test we can use. Does anybody know that? No, repeating modifies a noun is not going to be right as many times as it gets repeated. Does anybody know the test that we can use? Yeah, Macrina, that's a good idea. I call it the thing test. The thing test, all right? The thing test is a way to test an adjective. If you can put the word thing after the word and it makes sense, it's probably an adjective, like yellow thing, happy thing, tall thing, small thing, and so on. All right. So the thing test, where you put the word thing after the word, if it makes sense, it could be an adjective. Now, if we take the word non, which means not, if we take the word non and we say not thing, you see that doesn't make any sense. So it's not an adjective. Okay. It's not an adjective, it's an adverb. Some of you got it right. It's an adverb. Notice it's not followed by a noun, so it wouldn't make sense anyway. It's followed by a verb. It's modifying a verb, not a noun. It's an adverb. And the verb receperunt means they did receive. They did receive, and then non says no, actually they did not receive. Okay, non receperunt. They did not receive him. So to his own he came, and his own is the subject of this phrase, his own did not receive him. They did not receive him. What receive means here is they did not accept him. They did not welcome him. They rejected him. Okay? That's what it means to not receive him. He came to his own. It's like, imagine if you were away from home for a while, like you were a soldier at war, and you returned home and you showed up at the house and knocked on the front door, and then your family looked and saw you and slammed the door in your face. That's what it means when it says they did not receive him. He came home to his own people, to his own things, and his own did not receive him. Okay, that's verse 11 there. Verse 12. Quote, quote, autem receperunt eum. Quote, quote, autem receperunt eum. Quote, quote means however many. However many. The word quote used as a question means how many. So if you wanted to ask how many there are, you would say quote. How many? When you see the word doubled like this, it means however many. However many, quote, quote. Then we have another word here, autem. Who knows what autem means? Autem means however. Good. Now, what I want you to see here, pay attention. I already got the answer. What I want you to see is that this translation can be a little confusing because we have however many, and then it's followed by a word that means however. So we have however many, however. That sounds confusing. And you've got to make sure you remember why there are two howevers there. The first, however, has to do with the translation of quote, quote, however many. The second, however, has to do with the word autem. What part of speech is autem? Think, don't just guess, think. What part of speech? Think about what it does in the sentence. I didn't ask about the first, however. I asked about autem. What part of speech is autem? Didn't ask for the meaning of the phrase. I asked for the part of speech for autem. Conjunction. Good, Josh. Good, Connor. It's a conjunction. It's not an adjective. Let's just stop there. Margaret, you said it's an adjective, but let's use the thing test. It means however. So if I put thing after that and said however thing, that doesn't make any sense. So it's not an adjective. Okay. Use the thing test. It's a conjunction. So however many, however. And what that is a conjunction that shows that the idea is changing. All right. It shows that the idea of the first verse is changing, and there's a contrary idea in the second verse. So to his own he came, and his own did not receive him. That's negative, right? That's sort of a bad message. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But now this second sentence, the second verse, this second verse is positive, and therefore we have a conjunction that sort of switches the mood. So we say, to his own he came, his own did not receive him. That was pretty bad. However, you see how it introduces a contrary idea. However many did receive him, recepirunt eum, however many did receive him, even though many rejected him, however many, however, did receive him, dedit eis potestatem. Dedit eis potestatem. So he came to his own rejected him. He could have just packed up and went back to where he came from and said, forget these people, right? But he didn't. However many or however few did receive him, dedit eis potestatem. Dedit, what does dedit mean? Who can tell me what dedit means? He gave, very good, okay? So however many did receive him, he gave, and then we have eis. What does eis mean? He gave to them, very good. He gave to them, not his. His would be eius. That's a different form. Eis means to them. So here we have a verb followed by an object. This is called an indirect object. He gave to them. He gave to them. And in grammar, you'll learn that this indirect object, like he gave to them, that's marked with the dative case in Latin. And so we see this pronoun here in the dative case, and it's plural. He gave to them. What did he give them? He gave them potestatem. What does potestatem mean? Power. Very good. He gave to them power. He gave to them potestatem. This is why it doesn't really make sense when people in modern society say, you know, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, you know, it's all kind of equal. No, it's not equal. It's not equal because when people receive Christ, he gives to them power. It's not the same. Every religion, you know, you can't just say every religion's the same. There's a difference. We claim to believe in God, and yet when we receive Christ, he gives to those who receive him power. We're not all equal. It's not all the same. Those who receive Christ, to them he gives power. Power to do what? Power to blow up buildings, power to kill people, power to conquer. No, that's not what he gives them power for. Right? Power to lift weights, power to hit home runs. No, that's not what he gives power for. Okay? He gave to them power. And this is what he gave them power for. Filios Dei fieri. Filios Dei fieri. He gave to them power. Filios. What does filios mean? Filios means sons. Make sure you note that it's plural, okay? He gives to them, or he gave to them power, sons Dei. What does Dei mean? And pay attention to the forms. Don't just say God. Pay attention to the forms. He gave to them power, sons of God, fieri. What is fieri? Fieri. To become, okay? To become. Fieri, to become. Good. So when someone receives Christ, and I said what receives means, to welcome him. You know, he comes, he claims to be, like St. John the Baptist said, he is the Lamb of God who comes to take away the sins of the world. He comes to his own, he comes into the world. Whoever receives him, he gives to them power to become sons of God. That's what he gives them. That's what's different between true Christianity and every other religion. Christ gives to those who receive him power to become sons of God. And then we have to ask, you know, as we read this, we should ask, well, what does it mean to become sons of God, right? What does it mean? He gives them power to become sons of God. We have to think about what it means to be a son, right? What it means to be a son doesn't just mean that you're born to someone. It also means that you obey that person, right? You obey your parents. The commandments say, children, obey your parents. So if you choose not to obey your parents, you may be a son because you were born to a certain person, but you don't act like a son. And therefore, you're really not a son, not a true son. He gives to them power to become sons of God. He gives them power to become obedient children of God, people who actually obey God's commandments. Son is just a general term. The rule in grammar, just so you know, Bernadette's a good question. The rule in grammar, and modern society will fuss about this because they're crazy, but in grammar, you know, we have male and female, and when we refer to male and female, and we really aren't trying to make any point about which gender, we just use the masculine gender as the default. Like when I say man, it means men and women, right? It's not some kind of like sexist thing where we're discriminating. It's just how grammar works. You have to pick one, and remember that language is established by convention. It's not natural. And we have to pick one, and the way that we do it is we use the masculine gender. Okay? So that's why we do that. It's not some kind of like, oh, back in the old days, they oppressed women and just referred to them as men. No, that's not why. It's a grammatical thing, right? It's a conventional grammatical thing, okay? So otherwise, every single time we try to write a pronoun, we have to write like he/she, him/her, and it just gets annoying. It makes language obnoxious, and we don't do that, all right? So he gave to them power to become sons of God. And that word sons is just general. It refers to both male and female. He gave to them power to become sons of God. So to become a son of God, follow me here. Don't get crazy with chat. To become a son of God, you cannot do it by yourself. That's why, like, if you say, well, I don't want to be a Christian, I just want to be a good person, it's not going to work. You're not going to have the strength to be a good person in a world surrounded by all kinds of problems and with a nature that's weak and imperfect, okay? You need power in order to be able to do God's will, and that power comes through Christ, who gives us that power. Let me ask you, I know you've studied catechism. How does Christ give that power to men? What are we even talking about here? Is this like some kind of like magic fairy dust that he sprinkles on people? You know, does he give them special food to eat? Do they find some special herbs out in the woods that, you know, God leads them to find the magic mushroom and then they eat it and they grow stronger? How does he actually give this strength? Yeah, so I see a couple ideas: sacraments, baptism, something even more general than that. If you pray the rosary Let's see if anybody knows their mysteries of the rosary. What is the third glorious mystery? What is the third glorious mystery? Don't guess. If you don't know, just be quiet. What's the third glorious mystery? Yeah, that's right, Joseph. Pentecost, right? The descent of the Holy Spirit. Very good, Margaret. The third glorious mystery is the descent of the Holy Spirit. Good. That's how Christ gives power to those who receive him to become sons of God. He gives to them the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit then produces in them what are called the fruits of the Holy Spirit. And that's what makes us to become sons of God. Okay, that's enough with chat. Yeah, confirmation is a part of it. Baptism's a part of it. But it's also first communion. It's also communion, confession, all the sacraments. They're all means of grace. We say means of grace. And that word grace, when we say God gives us grace, this is what we're talking about. He gives us power, strength to actually do these things. So when you read saint stories and you read, famous stories about, matrimony means that he gives grace to married couples to be able to live a married life and do all the things that married couples need to do. Okay. So you're not asked to do this on your own. You should always feel like you don't have enough strength to do what you're supposed to do. That's true. You don't have enough strength. The way that you get that strength, a lot of it, you have to be patient because God gives it to us over time. You grow over time and you grow in strength over time. And when you don't have strength, you need to learn to pray for that strength. People who are dishonest, people who are not sincere, will use their weakness as an excuse to not do good things. They'll say, oh, I can't do that. And what they're doing is they're using their weakness as an excuse. Whereas a devout person, a virtuous person will say, I don't have the strength to do that. Therefore, I have to pray for that strength. Okay, so you see the difference. You see the difference in the heart of a person who wants to do good and a person who's looking for an excuse to not do good, right? Good deeds are never easy, and we need strength, we need power to do them, and that power comes from God. So anyway, that's the key to the whole Christian life. You're not asked to do these things by yourself. You're asked to do them with strength that God himself provides. So whoever did receive him, he didn't just pack up and leave and say, yeah, forget these miserable people. Whoever did receive him, however many did receive him, he gave to them power to become sons of God. It doesn't say that he gave them wealth. It doesn't say that he made them healthy. It doesn't say that he made them famous. It says that he gave them power to become sons of God. And if you have a sincere desire for the Christian life, what you should desire is to be given power so that you may become a son of God. That's what you should desire. Okay? He gave to them power, sons of God, to become. Who did he give this power to? Who did he give this power to? It tells us in this next line. His qui credunt in nomine eius. Okay? His qui credunt in nomine eius. What does this word his mean? He gave to them power. To whom did he give this power? His. What does his mean? Who can tell me what his means? It means to these. It's dative case. It means to these or to those. Those is okay in this verse here. To these. He gave it to these or to those. Qui. What does qui mean? What does qui mean? Just answer the comments in the chat. Don't we don't need you to share all of your intellectual activity. Qui means who, all right? His qui, to those who credunt. What does credunt mean? What does credunt mean? To those who credunt, believe. Very good. To those who believe. To those who believe. Good. So whom does he give this power to? He gives this power to those who believe, not to those who reject him. What does it mean to receive him? It means to believe. What do we believe? We believe in nomine eius. In nomine eius. What does that mean? What does in nomine eius mean? In his name, in name his. Good. Excuse me. So to those who believe in his name. So now you should be asking yourself, what in the world does it mean to believe in his name? Well, this word here, credunt, gives you a good clue of how you actually do this. Credunt, right? If we think about the word credunt, it should remind us of the word credo, right? Credo. Credunt means they believe. What does credo mean? Credo. What does credo mean? I believe. Where have you heard that before? Where have you heard that before? The Creed, very good, at Mass, in the Apostles' Creed, good, or the Nicene Creed, right? So just think about it. When we attend Mass, and not just Mass, but anywhere we say the Creed, right? You could say it when you're laying in bed if you want to. You don't have to be at Mass to say the Creed. The Apostles' Creed is basically where we do this, where we express our belief in God's name. And think about what we say in the Creed. We say, I believe in God, the Father. And then we go on to say, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, and in the Holy Spirit. So you can see that in the Creed, we're moved to confess that we believe. So we actually fulfill this, what we're reading about here in verse 12, when we say the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene, or any creed, Nicene Creed, there are others as well. So that's why when we say the creed, it's pretty important, because you're actually saying you do believe. You're one of these people who receive Christ. You're one of these people who believe in his name. And if you believe in his name, he promises that he is going to give you power to make you to become a son of God. And not only is he going to give you power to make you better, but he's also already given you power to believe in the first place, because even faith itself, if you study the catechism, is a theological virtue. A theological virtue. Faith, the ability to believe, is a theological virtue. Does anybody know what I mean by theological virtue? Anybody study catechism and know what a theological virtue is? Well, those are the theological virtues, Macrina. Faith, hope, and love are the three theological virtues. But what is a theological virtue? What's special about those three things? There are other virtues, right? Prudence is a virtue. Courage is a virtue. Temperance is a virtue. Justice is a virtue. What's special about those three things? Very good. They're infused. Okay, next question. What does it mean to be infused? They're virtues that are infused. What in the world does that mean? They're placed into. Very good. Okay, let me make this simple. Pay attention here. Listen, that's enough with chat. Listen. The theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, are virtues that God has to put in you. Okay, so they're not natural. God has to put them in you. That's what this verse is talking about. He gave to them power. What does that mean? He gave to them, or he gives to them, these virtues. What does the word virtue mean? It means power. Okay, so natural virtues or classical virtues are powers that good men have a habit of. Okay, justice, prudence, temperance. Fourth one I can't think off the top of my head right now. The three theological virtues are virtues not that natural men, thank you, not virtues that natural men just stir up in themselves. You can't make yourself believe. You can't make yourself hope. You can't make yourself love. That's a virtue that God has to actually put in you. He has to give it to you. It's infused virtue. And we learn here in verse 12, however many receive him, he gave to them power. We could say grace instead of power. We could say virtue instead of power. He gave to them power, sons of God to become, to those who believe in his name. So we've got a lot packed into that verse. Everything you need to know about the Christian life is really present there in verse 12 of John chapter 1. However many believe in him, To them, he gave to them power to become sons of God to those who believe in his name. Now, it's pretty cool to think about, because if you do believe in God and you say the Apostles' Creed and say, yeah, I really believe that stuff, I do believe, that's proof that God has actually given you this grace, that you have actually received this virtue. And when you look at other people in the world, and you see people who don't believe, they don't fear God, right? They do sinful things and they act as if they don't even think about God. They lie, they cheat, they don't even want to go to church, things like that. They have no interest in religion. And you look, it's often hard for Christians to understand how someone can live like that. But that's because we take it for granted that we believe because something has actually caused us to believe. We're the strange ones, I like to say. We're the weird ones. Not all the people in the world, they're not the weird ones. We're the weird ones. We think differently because we've received this power to become sons of God. So that's what verse 12 is talking about. This isn't theology class, so I'm going to keep going here. Verse 13, okay? Verse 13, we continue to talk about these people, right? These people. Verse 13, let's learn more about these people who receive him, who he gives power to, who believe in his name. Verse 13, who, continuing to describe them, who non ex sanguinibus. Non ex sanguinibus. Who can tell me what that means? These people, how do we identify these people? Non ex sanguinibus, not out of bloods. What in the world does that mean? Not out of bloods. What in the world does that mean? Don't go ahead of me now. What in the world does not out of bloods? These are people not out of bloods. What in the world? Okay. Well, the idea of bloods here, I think it's safe to say, would refer to like different races of people or families. Okay. So it's not because you are a certain race of people or have the blood of a certain race or family, yeah, ancestry stuff, things like that, okay? He doesn't give power to become sons of God to people who belong to a certain family or race or come from certain ancestors. So there's no favoring of different persons or families. That's not how you become one of these people. So it's not like the Jewish religion where if you're born as a descendant of Abraham, you're a Jew. Christianity doesn't work like that. It's not a religion of a certain race. Non ex sanguinibus. Then we have the word neque. What does neque mean? What does neque mean? Neque means neither. Or nor, right? Who not out of bloods and not. The word neque literally means and not. Que means and, ne means not, but we translate it as nor. Who not out of bloods, nor ex voluntate carnis. What in the world does that mean? No, neque ex voluntate carnis. Ex voluntate. What does ex voluntate mean? Don't just say out of the flesh because you're skipping one of the words. Ex voluntate, neither out of the will of the flesh. Yeah, not out of the will of the flesh. So we have another strange phrase here, okay? These are people who are not out of bloods and not out of the will of the flesh, right? Not out of some bodily desire. So in other words, you can't make Christians, right? So a mother and a father can't say, hey, you know what? Let's make some Christians. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't make Christians. Okay. You can give birth to children, but you can't make Christians, not by the will of the flesh, not by voluntate viri. What does that mean? Neque ex voluntate viri. Stick with the lesson here. Don't chat about other stuff. You just confuse everybody. Neque ex voluntate viri, nor out of the will of man. So it's not something that men can just will. It's not in human control. not in human control, not from bloods, not from the will of the flesh, not from the will of man. Said, now notice this is a conjunction that introduces a change, right? But said, but ex Deo. What does ex Deo mean? Ex Deo. Don't add words. Out of God. Out of God, nati sunt. What does nati mean? Nati. What does nati mean? Born. Sunt. What does sunt mean? Nati sunt. Are. Okay, so let's put verse 13 back together. However many receive him, he gave to them power to become sons of God to those who believe in his name, who not out of bloods, nor out of the will of the flesh, nor out of the will of man, but out of God or from God are born or have been born. So this is what it means to be born again, right? To be born again means you have this power given to you. You have this life put in you that causes you to believe and leads you to receive this power to become sons of God. So you have this idea of being born into God's family as one of his sons. Jesus gives this power. Notice it tells us Jesus gives this power to those who believe in him. Okay? Not something that men can will, something that only God can do. And we're born as sons of God by God himself. That's verse 13. Verse 14. Et verbum caro factum est. Et verbum caro factum est. You know what et verbum means? Et verbum, and the word. So we're going back now to the first 5 verses and we're talking about the word again. Caro. What does caro mean? We just saw a form of this word right here in carnis. Caro means flesh. And the word flesh, factum est. What does factum est mean? We've seen that before. Was made. Very good. And the word flesh was made. So we've got this very strange verse here. Et verbum caro factum est. And the word flesh was made. So in the beginning, in verses 1 through 5, we were reading about the word. We said, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. So we're learning about this idea of the word. And now in verse 14, we learn that this word, whatever this is, this word that was in the beginning with God and that is God, has now become flesh. The word caro factum est. The word flesh was made, et habitavit in nobis. Et means and, habitavit means lived or dwelt. We say a place where something lives is called a habitat in English, right? We say to live in a city is to inhabit the city. Habitavit is where that English word comes from. And he dwelt in nobis. In nobis. That could mean in us, with us, for us, a number of different meanings. We have to use the context to figure it out. Bernadette has a question. 1 second. Are we supposed to memorize word for word when we study, or just so we can read and speak it? In the lessons, you're supposed to do the translation exercises. You're supposed to write them out and write them out and write them out until you know the translation and don't need to look up any of the words. So that's the answer. I don't want to get into talk about memorization because I think that's sort of a kind of a modern nonsense talk, because if you don't know something, you don't know it, right? If I say, what does the word caro mean? And you say, oh, I don't know. Well, the way that you know is by memorizing it. And if you haven't memorized it, I don't know how someone would say they know something that they can't tell you the answer for, right? That's what it means to know it. So memorization is one way. It's what we do. Memorization is how you learn. When we talk about memorization, normally we're talking about somebody sitting at a desk, staring at a flashcard or something like that, and reciting something over and over and over again. And we just call that memorization. But Memorization is just how you learn, right? You remember things, you know, because you know it. It's now part of your own thoughts. So of course we have to memorize the meaning of words. That's the only way to learn them. But how you memorize them is a question to discuss. Sitting around just reciting words on a flashcard, I don't believe that that's the best way to do it. I believe that doing the translation exercises and just writing out the sentences and then writing the translation of the words and doing that again and again, that's the best way to learn the meanings, because you'll associate the words with other words, and those other words will help you to remember the other words. And you see how it helps you to memorize, just like songs, right? You memorize the words of a song because there's music and there's these other things involved that help you to remember the next word, okay? So it's better to memorize in context than to just memorize on flashcards. That's why I assign you to do the translation exercises. And if you choose to skip that and not do it, well then, then you're stuck. But that's why I recommend translation exercises. That's the best way to do it. Okay? We used to do it with flashcards, but translating helps better. Yeah, it's flashcards is not natural. Translation work is natural. Okay, keep the words together. They help you to remember one another, and they also help you to remember the meanings. That's why we memorize songs so easily, because there's this music and there's other words, and it helps us to remember the other words. Okay, so verse 14, the word was made flesh and dwelt. And the translation in the lesson, I think, is among us, dwelt among us. And that goes back to verse 11. To his own he came. To his own he came. The word was made flesh and dwelt among us. To his own he came. The word was made flesh and dwelt among us. All right, so we've got through the first 3 verses. We're going to stop there with Latin reading. Now, if you haven't got to this lesson yet, obviously that's a ton of information, and I'm not stupid. I know that that's a lot of information, and you may feel lost, but you're going to have the opportunity to go through these verses one word at a time when you study these lessons. And if you want to, you could watch this video again. But I just want you to learn how the verses are translated, how they're read. And just becoming familiar with the vocabulary is helpful. So I'm not expecting you to learn and understand all this, okay? If you don't have Latin lessons, all you need to do is add the course. So, we're not born with Latin lessons. You've got to enroll in that course. Okay, so that's all for verses, let's say 11 through 13 today. We got into verse 14, but only got halfway through. So we'll consider today, we went through verses 11 through 13. Next week, we'll finish verses 14 and 15. Okay, so that's all for Latin reading. What I'd like to do in the last 10 minutes or so we've got is look at vocabulary. Now, you can study this on your own, of course, and you're going to need to learn it. But what's helpful for students learning Latin is just sometimes to have somebody read it so they know how to pronounce everything. Okay. Connor asked about Latin reading too. No, we don't continue in the Gospel of John like James says. We read Cicero. Cicero is a Roman, so it's real Roman literature. And the Gospel of John is easy because you already kind of know the content. You already know the story pretty much. In the letters of Cicero, you don't have any idea what he's talking about. And so it puts more pressure on your knowledge of grammar to do the translation work. Bernadette, when you say, am I supposed to memorize it? I don't know what the pronoun it means because it could refer to 1,000 things. What do you mean by it? Am I supposed to memorize it? My brain can run to a lot of things that might be it. So I don't know what you're asking there. Let's look at the vocab. Lesson 3. You see the topic of lesson 3 is the world. Okay. The topic of lesson 3 is the world, and the Latin word for world is mundus. This is lesson 3 in vocabulary. So follow me here. You have to know what the words mean in Latin. It's very simple. Like, the only way that you can know the words is to memory is just what your brain does. So it doesn't really make much sense to say, do I have to memorize it? Am I supposed to memorize it? To learn it, you have to memorize it. That's what it means to learn. All right. The question is, how should you do that? If I ask you, what does the word verbo mean, and you don't know, it's not that you didn't remember, it's that you didn't learn it, right? It's just, that's what it means to learn. So don't use this word memorize, because I think it's misused. It's just to learn. Do I have to learn the lesson? Yes, you have to learn the lesson. Do I have to be able to recite it? No. That's never assigned for you to recite it like a poem. So don't add to the lesson. You've got to be able to do the translation exercise. You're supposed to continue doing it until you can do it without looking at the lesson. You're allowed to copy the Latin out. You don't have to memorize it and write it out from memory. You copy the lesson, copy the Latin, and then write the meaning of each word. Okay? And you should continue to do that until you can write the meaning of the words without having to look at the lesson. That's what it means to learn the lesson. Okay? But as for vocabulary, lesson 3, we study, the topic is the world, or mundus in Latin. And then we go through the vocabulary. Remember that in vocabulary, the words that are in italics are really the important vocabulary items in the lesson. So there's lots of words that you can study, but the ones that are in italics, they often have numbers next to them. Those are the most important words. They're really the focus of the lesson. So we want to just learn the names of things that relate to the topic of the world, or mundus. We have this picture. It's an old engraving. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see generally we've got stars up in the sky and clouds. We've got birds flying in the air. There's some woods over here on land. Then we've got water in the background. We've got a man and woman on the ground here. There's some animals in the picture. So it's just a picture of the world. All right. Imagine like looking out the window. And I guess these people have no clothes on, so it's probably like creation, like Adam and Eve in the beginning of the world, okay? So an image of the world. And you can see there's numbers in there, so some of the items that are described in the lesson, the numbers are written next to those things so you could find them in the picture if you look carefully, all right? So number 1, we have the word caelum, C-A-E-L-U-M. Follow me here, don't start chatting and distract people. And also, if you're chatting, you're not paying attention anyway, so you're wasting your own time. The first word there is pronounced caelum. That refers to the heavens. The caelum, you can think about it. It's easy to remember. Just think of ceiling, right? The ceiling is like the caelum in the room. So caelum habet ignam et stellas. Caelum, or the heaven, you see the translation over here, has fire and stars. The heaven has fire and stars. Where does heaven have fire? What does that mean? Where does heaven have fire? The sun, yeah. The sun is just a big ball of fire. So the heaven has fire and stars, right? Ignem and stellas. Nubes means clouds, nubes. Nubes pendent in aire. Now think about this. If you know jewelry, what is a pendant? What is a pendant? If I say I'm wearing a pendant, what does that mean? A pendant. It's a dangling, yeah, it's a hanging, a jewel, or it could be, it could be anything. It just means something that's hanging, right? Something that hangs around your neck, a pendant. Okay, it could be anything. So this verb here in Latin, pendant, it's where the word pendant in jewelry comes from. It just means to hang. So the nubes pendent in aire. The nubes, the clouds hang in the air, right? They just hang in the air. Nubes pendent in aire. Then we have aves, birds, aves. A place where birds are kept is called an aviary. It's a place for birds. Aves, birds. What do birds do? They volant. Birds volant. What does volant mean? They fly, right? Yeah, they fly. If something is volatile, it means it's capable of flying, or, sometimes like exploding, right? Birds fly. Where do they fly? They fly sub nubibus. Sub nubibus. They fly under the clouds. So the heaven has fire and stars, clouds hang in the air, birds fly under the clouds. Then we have pisces. It's pronounced pisces in Christian Latin. It would be pisces in classical Latin. Pisces, fish. Pisces, natant. What do fish do? They natant. What does natant mean? They swim. Natant, they swim. Where do they swim? They swim in aqua, in the water, right? In the water. Pisces, fishes or fish, natant in aqua. They swim in water. Terra, this word is used in Spanish today, so it's you might see it in the names of cities and things like that out west. Terra means the earth or the land. Terra habet montes. The earth has montes, mountains, montes. Silvas means woods or forests. Silva means forest or woods. Campos means open fields. So a college campus, what is a college campus? It means the land where the buildings are on campus. Usually it's an open area, the campus. Campos means fields. The earth has animalia, which means beasts. Animalia comes from the word anima, which means soul, because they're living, moving, sensing creatures, animalia. And then homines is men. Okay, so the earth has, in other words, these things are not in the heaven, they're not in the air, they're not in the water, they're on earth. The earth has mountains, forests, fields, animals, men. And again, notice that there's numbers next to these words. And if you look up here in the picture, if you look carefully, you can see the numbers. Like here's a number 8. They're almost like hidden just because it's an old picture. But number 8 is down there. Number 9 is there. It looks like number 7 over here. Hard to read. So the numbers are there in the picture if you really search for them. So the earth has mountains, forests, fields, animals, men. And then at the end, ita maxima corpora mundi. Thus the greatest, thus is ita, maxima means the greatest, corpora means body. Thus the greatest bodies of the world, quatuor elementa, 4 elements, the 4 elements, sunt plena habitatoribus suis. They are full with their own inhabitants. So there are 4 elements. Does anybody know what the 4 elements are? Anybody study Pliny or Aristotle and know the 4 elements? Very good. Athanasius, fire, water, air, and earth. Earth, air, fire, and water. Put them in the right order from top to bottom. What comes first? Put them in order from highest to lowest. Fire, water, air, nope. Fire, earth, air, nope. Put them in order from highest to lowest. Fire, air, water, earth. That's right, George. Fire is the highest, air is next, then water, then earth. In classical philosophy, those are called the 4 elements. That's what it's talking about here. So in the lesson, we see the 4 elements, right? We see fire in heaven. We see fire, we see air. We see water, where the fish swim, and then we see earth, where man and animals live. So we've got the 4 elements, fire, air, water, and earth, and we've got the different creatures that inhabit the 4 elements, okay? So that's a fast flyover, but at least for pronunciation and things like that, should make it simple. That's for lesson 3 on the world. And as I said before, we'll wrap up here. So if you're hanging on, just give me 1 more minute, we'll wrap up. What I said is, to study Latin properly, you should be focused first on Latin reading, and you should always be making progress in Latin reading. You should be working on Latin reading every day if you can, to try to get as much done as possible. Focus on Latin reading. Then, in addition to Latin reading, study Latin grammar. And the grammar, as you learn grammar, you'll begin to learn and understand more of the reading. But you need to have reading in your head. You need to have Latin in your head so you can think of examples of what you study in grammar. So study reading first, then grammar, and then study vocabulary. Keep vocabulary going on the background and just work through one lesson at a time and learn the vocabulary for each of these topics, and you'll build a vocabulary that will spread into all different subjects. Okay? That's how Latin is intended to be studied in the academy: reading, grammar, and vocab. Same is true for Greek: Greek reading, Greek grammar, Greek vocab. Same with English: English reading and English composition, then English grammar. You really don't need vocabulary in English, but especially if you're studying Latin and Greek. So that's how the languages are to be studied. That's all that I wanted to share today. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, I'll hang out as long as you want to chat. But those of you who are ready to go, you're free to go. I'm not going to get into any new discussions, okay? I hope that's helpful. God bless you all. Yes, you're all free to leave now. If you have any questions or would like to chat about any of this, feel free to hang around and I'll stay as long as there are questions. If you don't have Latin vocab, just add it. You can add any courses that your parents approve of. Thank you all for coming. If there's anything you'd like to talk about or ask about, I'll hang out as long as questions keep coming in. Let me stop the recording here.